My brother convinced our parents to cut me out of their will, so I became their caregiver and changed it back. I never thought my own brother would stab me in the back like this, but here we are. Growing up, we were always different. He was the golden child who could do no wrong, while I was the screw-up who couldn't seem to get anything right in my parents' eyes. He went to college on a full scholarship, got married young to his high school sweetheart, and landed a cushy corporate job right out of graduation. Meanwhile, I dropped out of community college after 2 years, bounced between different jobs, and never really found my calling until my late 20s. The divide between us only grew wider as the years passed. Every family gathering became a subtle competition where he would casually mention his latest promotion or his kids' achievements, while I sat there feeling like the family disappointment. My parents would beam with pride when talking about his success, but whenever anyone asked about me, they would just say I was still figuring things out, with that forced smile that didn't quite reach their eyes. Things came to a head about 3 years ago when our father started showing signs of dementia. At first, it was just little things, forgetting where he put his keys, repeating the same story twice in one conversation, or getting confused about what day it was. But gradually, it became more serious. He would forget to take his medications, leave the stove on, or sometimes not recognize familiar faces. Our mother, who was already dealing with her own health issues, including diabetes and arthritis, was struggling to cope with caring for him. That's when my brother swooped in like some kind of savior. He started visiting more frequently, taking them to doctor's appointments and handling their finances. On the surface, it looked like he was being the perfect son, but I could see what was really happening. He was slowly but systematically poisoning them against me. During family dinners, he would make subtle comments about my lifestyle choices, my lack of stability, and my apparent inability to contribute meaningfully to the family. He would say things like how worried he was about my future, how I never seemed to learn from my mistakes, and how I always seemed to need money from them. The worst part was that he wasn't entirely wrong about some of it. I had gone through a rough patch financially a few years back and had to ask for help with rent a couple of times. I had also made some poor decisions in my personal life that had caused my parents stress and worry. But what he conveniently left out was how I had turned my life around. I had started my own small business, was finally making decent money, and hadn't asked them for anything in over 2 years. I had also been the one calling them every week to check in, helping with yard work on weekends, and taking them grocery shopping when they needed it. None of that seemed to matter to him, or, apparently, to them. The manipulation was so gradual and subtle that I didn't realize what was happening until it was almost too late. He would have private conversations with them about their legacy and how important it was to make sure their assets went to someone who would be responsible with them. He talked about his children's college funds, his mortgage, and all the ways he was already contributing to the family's well-being. Meanwhile, he painted me as the irresponsible younger brother who would probably just waste any inheritance on frivolous things. He brought up every mistake I had ever made, every time I had disappointed them, and every reason why I couldn't be trusted with money. He was building a case against me, and I was completely oblivious to it. The first real sign that something was wrong came during a family barbecue last summer. I was helping my mom in the kitchen when she made an offhand comment about how glad she was that my brother was so responsible and how she didn't have to worry about him making bad decisions with money. When I asked what she meant, she just gave me this look that said everything I needed to know. She had lost faith in me, and I could see it in her eyes. I tried to have a conversation with my dad about it, but his condition had deteriorated to the point where he couldn't really follow complex discussions anymore. He would just nod along and agree with whatever the last person had told him. It was heartbreaking to see this strong, intelligent man reduced to a shadow of his former self, but it also made me realize how vulnerable he was to manipulation. That's when I started paying closer attention to what my brother was doing. I noticed how he would always find reasons to be alone with our parents, how he would steer conversations toward financial topics, and how he would subtly reinforce negative narratives about me. He was playing the long game, and he was winning. The final blow came about 6 months ago when I accidentally discovered that they had changed their will. I was helping my mom organize some paperwork when I saw a document from their attorney's office. I didn't mean to snoop, but I couldn't help but notice my name was nowhere to be found. According to the new will, everything was going to my brother and his family. I felt like I had been punched in the gut. It wasn't even about the money, it was about what it represented. My own parents had essentially written me out of their lives, deciding that I wasn't worthy of being part of their legacy. All those years of trying to prove myself, of working to rebuild our relationship, meant nothing in the end. I confronted my brother about it, and he didn't even try to deny it. He just shrugged and said that our parents had made their decision based on who they thought would be more responsible with their assets. He claimed he had nothing to do with it, but I could see the smug satisfaction in his eyes. He had won, and he knew it. That night, I went home and seriously considered cutting ties with the whole family. What was the point of continuing to try when they had already made it clear how they felt about me? I spent weeks wallowing in self-pity and anger, barely talking to anyone and seriously considering moving to another state just to get away from it all. But then something changed. I realized that I was letting my brother win by giving up. If I walked away, he would have successfully driven a wedge between me and my parents, and they would spend their remaining years believing his version of who I was. I decided that instead of running away, I would prove him wrong in the most direct way possible. I started spending more time with my parents, not because I was trying to get back into the will, but because I genuinely wanted to be there for them. I began visiting them twice a week, helping with household chores and just being present in their lives. I didn't talk about money or inheritance, I just focused on being a good son. At first, my brother was suspicious of my increased involvement. He would make sarcastic comments about my sudden interest in family, but I ignored him. I wasn't doing this for him or to compete with him. I was doing it because it was the right thing to do. My parents needed help, and I was in a position to provide it. As my father's condition worsened, the demands on my mother increased exponentially. She was exhausted, overwhelmed, and clearly struggling to cope. My brother, for all his talk about responsibility and family values, was conspicuously absent during the day-to-day caregiving. He would show up for doctor's appointments and family dinners, but he wasn't there at 3 in the morning when my father was confused and wandering around the house. I started staying overnight more frequently, helping with medications and making sure they both got proper meals. I learned how to manage my father's care routine, coordinate with his medical team, and provide emotional support to my mother. It was exhausting and emotionally draining, but it was also incredibly rewarding. Slowly, I began to see changes in how my parents viewed me. My mother started expressing genuine gratitude for my help, and even my father, in his lucid moments, would thank me for being there. They began to see me not as the irresponsible younger son, but as someone who had stepped up when they needed help the most. The real turning point came about 3 months ago when my mother had a medical emergency. She collapsed at home while I was there, and I had to call an ambulance and coordinate her care. I spent the next week basically living at the hospital, making sure she was comfortable and handling all the logistics that come with a medical crisis. My brother showed up for a few hours here and there, but he was clearly uncomfortable with the hospital environment and the intensity of the situation. He kept talking about how he needed to get back to work, how his family needed him, and how he couldn't just drop everything like I could. It was during this time that I realized the fundamental difference between us. He saw caring for our parents as an obligation, while I saw it as a privilege. When my mother was discharged, she needed round-the-clock care for several weeks. Without hesitation, I took a leave of absence from my business and moved in with them temporarily. I handled everything: medications, meals, physical therapy exercises, and just being there to provide comfort and companionship. It was during this period that my mother and I had some of the most honest conversations we had ever had. She apologized for the way she had treated me over the years, acknowledging that she had been unfair in her comparisons between my brother and me. She said she had been so focused on traditional markers of success that she had failed to see my other qualities. She also revealed something that shocked me. She had been having doubts about the will change for months, but didn't know how to address it. She said that while my brother had convinced them it was the right decision at the time, watching my dedication and sacrifice over the past year had made her question whether they had made a mistake. The most surprising revelation came when she told me that my brother had been pressuring them to move into a nursing home so he could sell their house and invest the money for their future care. She said he had presented it as a practical solution, but she could tell he was more interested in the financial aspects than their actual well-being. This was the moment I realized that my brother's manipulation went even deeper than I had imagined. He wasn't just trying to secure his inheritance, he was actively working to control every aspect of their lives for his own benefit. The thought of my parents being pushed into a nursing home against their wishes, just so he could get his hands on their assets sooner, made me angrier than I had ever been. I didn't confront him directly about this revelation. Instead, I continued to focus on providing the best possible care for my parents. I researched in-home care options, connected them with community resources, and made modifications to their house to improve safety and accessibility. I was determined to show them that there were alternatives to the nursing home option my brother was pushing. The breakthrough came when my father had what his doctor called a moment of clarity, a brief period where his dementia symptoms seemed to lift, and he was fully present and aware. During this time, he pulled me aside and said something that I will never forget. He told me that he was proud of the man I had become and that he was sorry for not seeing it sooner. He said that watching me care for them had reminded him of the values he had tried to instill in both of his sons, and that he could see I had been listening all along. He also said that he was concerned about some of the decisions they had made recently, and that he wanted to make sure things were set right before it was too late. The next day, he asked me to help him contact their attorney. He said he wanted to review some documents and make sure everything was in order. I was hesitant at first, not wanting to appear like I was trying to influence him, but he insisted that this was his decision and that he needed my help to make it happen. When we met with the attorney, my father explained that he wanted to make changes to their will and estate planning documents. He said that recent events had given him a clearer picture of his son's true characters and that he wanted the distribution of assets to reflect that understanding. The attorney was initially cautious, given my father's condition, but after speaking with him extensively and consulting with his doctor, he determined that my father was competent to make these decisions. The new will restored me as an equal beneficiary with my brother, but it also included some specific provisions that reflected my father's values. A portion of the estate was designated for my parents' ongoing care, with me named as the primary caregiver and decision-maker. There were also provisions that would protect the assets from being liquidated prematurely, and requirements that any major decisions about my parents' care be made jointly. But the most significant change was the addition of a clause that stated if either beneficiary attempted to manipulate or coerce my parents into changing their will, they would forfeit their entire inheritance. This was my father's way of ensuring that his final wishes would be respected, and that neither of his sons would be able to take advantage of his or my mother's vulnerability. When my brother found out about the changes, he was furious. He accused me of taking advantage of our father's condition and manipulating him into changing the will. He threatened to contest it and claimed that I had been planning this all along. The irony of his accusations was not lost on me, considering what he had done to get me removed from the will in the first place. But what surprised me most was my parents' reaction to his outburst. Instead of being swayed by his emotional manipulation, they stood firm in their decision. My mother, in particular, seemed to see him clearly for the first time. She told him that his behavior was exactly why they had made the changes, and that his reaction was proving their point. The family dynamics shifted dramatically after this confrontation. My brother began visiting less frequently, and when he did come around, there was a tension that hadn't been there before. He seemed to realize that his manipulation tactics were no longer working, and that my parents were seeing through his facade. Meanwhile, my relationship with my parents continued to strengthen. We spent more time together, shared more honest conversations, and built the kind of relationship I had always wanted but never thought was possible. My father's condition continued to decline, but we were able to keep him comfortable at home with the help of professional caregivers and medical equipment. The most touching moment came about a month ago when my father, during one of his increasingly rare lucid moments, thanked me for giving them the gift of dignity in their final years. He said that being able to stay in their own home, surrounded by familiar things and people who truly cared about them, was more valuable than any amount of money. He also told me that he was proud of how I had handled the situation with my brother. He said that I could have chosen to be vindictive or petty, but instead, I had focused on what was truly important, taking care of family. He said that was the mark of a man with real character, and that he was sorry it had taken him so long to see it. As I write this, my father is in the final stages of his illness, and my mother is struggling with her own health issues. I continue to be their primary caregiver, and while it's challenging, I wouldn't trade this time with them for anything. I've learned more about love, sacrifice, and what it means to be a good son in the past year than I had in all the years before. My brother and I have reached an uneasy truce. We're civil to each other for our parents' sake, but the damage to our relationship may be irreparable. I'm sad about that, but I've also come to accept that some people are more interested in what they can get from relationships than what they can give to them. The strange thing is that I'm not even angry anymore. I've come to understand that his actions revealed more about his character than they did about mine. He was so focused on securing his financial future that he lost sight of what was truly valuable, the love and respect of his parents, and the opportunity to be there for them when they needed him most. In the end, I got something much more valuable than money or property. I got the chance to be the son my parents deserved, and they got to see who I really was before it was too late. The will may have been changed back, but that's not what matters most to me anymore. What matters is that I can look at myself in the mirror and know that I did the right thing, even when it was difficult. The experience has taught me that family isn't just about blood or legal documents. It's about showing up, being present, and putting someone else's needs before your own. My brother may have won the initial battle through manipulation and deceit, but in the end, love and genuine care won the war. I still don't know what the future holds, but I'm at peace with the choices I've made and the path I've taken. My parents will leave this world knowing they were loved and cared for, and that's a legacy that's worth more than any inheritance could ever be.